vibrant club was pulsating with music. In the private room there's a lively atmosphere with laughter, music and clinking of glasses. The room was beautifully decorated with balloons, streamers and a birthday banner. In the corner of the room, a feminine figure was uncomfortably shuffling in her seat, clutching onto the hem of her shirt. "Bella, with whom will we?" said Wine. She said, staring at Wine, who was nervously looking around from the corner of the room. "I thought that professor would accept my birthday invitation, but that jerk," she muttered, gulping the wine. "Molly, don't you know someone from the department who would get trapped easily?" she asked hopefully. "Trapped easily? Are you serious, Bella? Does Professor Kim seem an easy target to you?" she said, rolling her eyes. Bella chuckled. "That cold jerk is straightforward introvert, while Wine is a fool villager. They both are easy targets. They'll never know." "You're insane. You're saying this because he had rejected you. You still hold a grudge against him. His introvert doesn't make him a fool." Molly scoffed and turned around. Her eyes landed on a bunch of boys from their class. "Looks like luck is by your side today." Bella followed her gaze and smiled. "𝐘𝐸, my pawn is here," she mumbled with a smirk. "Don't you feel bad? After all, Wine is your sister." Bella just rolled her eyes. "Bella, it's your birthday and you're here. Look, Wine is also sitting there all alone." Bella clenched her jaw and looked at her fiancé, who was staring at Wine with a soft gaze. "Arthur, you don't have to worry about Wine. She's just uncomfortable. That's why she's sitting alone," she blinked, glaring at him. Arthur let out a sigh and nodded. "Sweetheart, don't spoil your mood," he spoke softly, tugging the hairstrand behind her ear. Bella forced a smile and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I'm fine, let's go. Professor Kim is also here." Arthur nodded with a smile and kissed her forehead. Bella gestured to Molly, who did thumbs up, understanding what she meant. Bella smirked and walked towards Wine. "Hey, Wine, why are you all alone here? Come enjoy with us," she said, holding her hand. "No, I'm fine here," she mumbled in a low tone. "Come on, Wine, you can't just stick to this chair. Enjoy the party. This is the first time you're celebrating my birthday with me. Let's have fun." She spoke in a sweet tone and began dragging Wine where everyone was sitting. Wine hesitantly sat while Arthur sat at her right along with Bella. "Thank you all for making my birthday extra special by being here," Bella said and picked up the glass of wine. They all clinked it and cheered. "Professor Kim, thank you for joining us. I wasn't expecting you," she said with a smile. 𝐾𝐸 was blankly staring at the glass in his hand. "Well, I was dragged here," he spoke coldly. Bella rolled her eyes. "We saw him out there and dragged him here," one of the students said. "Rude bastard." Bella thought and gestured something to Molly. "Hey, Wine, have a drink," she said, holding up a glass to her. "I don't drink," she hesitantly spoke. "Oh, come on, just try it out. I'm sure you'll like it." She forcefully brought the glass to her mouth. Wine moved it away. "No, I don't want to." 𝐾𝐸 glanced at them and opened his mouth to speak, but Arthur spoke. "Molly, don't force her if she doesn't want to drink," he sternly said and took away the glass from her. 𝐾𝐸 stood and walked away. Molly glanced at 𝐾𝐸 and smiled. "Fine, I'll bring juice for you," she said. Wine smiled and nodded. Bella dragged away Arthur while other students were busy in their own business. Molly placed the juice in front of her and walked away. Wine rubbed her palm together. She wanted to return home as soon as possible. She looked around. Almost everyone was wasted while 𝐾𝐸 was nowhere. She got the juice in one go. After a few moments, her phone beeped with a notification. She quickly picked up her phone and frowned seeing Bella's message. "One, please come to room number 284. I need your help." She swiftly rose and looked around for Arthur, but he was nowhere. Her heartbeat quickened out of fear. She quickly walked out, ignoring her dizzy head. After roaming for 15 minutes, she finally found the room 284 and barged in, but it was dark. "Bella, Bella, are you there?" she said in a timid tone. She held her head. The world seemed to swing around her. She saw white dots before her eyes and everything blacked out. Few hours later, Wine opened her eyes, feeling the shock of cold water splashing onto her face. She could hear murmurings around her, but she ignored it and held her aching head and sat. She hissed, rubbing her eyes, and looked around the room where all the students were surrounded by her, including Molly, Arthur and Bella, who was holding the bucket in her hand. She frowned, seeing them glaring at her with a weird gaze. A familiar voice beside her grabbed her attention. "What the hell is this?" he growled. "Professor Kim," Wine whispered, looking at him who was shirtless and then at herself. She was in 𝐾𝐸's shirt. What the hell did both of you do? Could you please explain? She passed Wine a dead stare. Wine shook her head as no. No, Bella, you're getting it wrong. She closed the sheet around her with teary eyes. Bella, let her explain. That's none of your business, Arthur. That's none of your business, Arthur. Keep quiet. She hissed at him. Arthur clenched his fist and walked out. All the students were whispering into each other's ears. Everyone get the hell out of here. His roar made them all silent. Everyone walked out. He glanced at Wine, who was busy crying. He frustratedly ran his fingers through his hair. Wine's heart dropped to her feet when she heard a familiar voice. Wine, disappointment and anger visible in his voice. Dad, she whispered, froze at her spot. She didn't dare to look at him. Dad, she hooked up with Professor Kim. Bella spoke with fake tears. Then passed her a dead stare while Wine lifted her head with a surprised look. What? She mumbled with disbelief. A sudden thought crossed her mind. I remember, Bella, you had texted me to help you. You texted that you are in room number 284 and need my help. I remember. Sam was watching Wine and Bella both intensely. Mr. Hong stepped forward and placed a harsh slap across Wine's face. I didn't expect this from you, Wine. I brought you from the village to give you a good life, but what did you do? He muttered through clenched jaw. Wine stared at him with disbelief. He was her father. At least he could have faith in her. The tears spilled over, tracing a path down her face. Don't lie, Wine. I was with Arthur all the time. Why would I even ask you for help? I have the text in my phone, she said, and searched for her phone, which was on the floor. She quickly picked it up and opened Bella's chat. Her eyes widened. There wasn't any message. Sam stared at Bella. He felt something fishy. Believe me, Dad, she had texted me. She whispered the last part and grabbed her hair. Disgusting, don't call me that again. He growled and walked out, followed by Bella, while Sam let out a sigh, staring at Wine. All this while, Sam didn't speak a word. Many thoughts were running through his mind. He remembered that after having a drink, he felt dizzy. He went to the washroom and passed out. When he woke up, he was lying beside Wine, who was in his shirt. They were surrounded by the students while Bella brought the bucket of cold water and splashed it on Wine. He knew someone had hatched this conspiracy against them, and he was suspicious of Bella. Sam completed his graduation a few months ago. He used to work as a professor along with being a student to pay his expenses. Due to his intelligence, he got this job easily. He just had to work till the examination. Meanwhile, Wine came from the village. For 22 years, everyone in the village, including her grandma, called her Jinx because her mom died after giving birth to her. Her dad left her in village because he couldn't take care of her. He used to go to the village and see her every month, but with passing time, he stopped seeing her because he got married and had Bella. For 22 years of her life, Wine had yearned for her father's love. Her grandpa made her a well-educated girl. Some time ago, her grandpa died and Mr. Hong came to attend his dad's funeral. When he saw Wine, she was the same as her mother. His heart clenched seeing his mother hitting her for small mistakes, and she tended to marry her off. So Mr. Hong decided to take her away with him. Her stepmom and sister were good at first, but then she realized her stepmom held a grudge against her while Bella would talk to her just when she had some work while her father seemed to forget her. Wine immersed herself in her studies and was grateful at least she wouldn't have to hear the tantrums of the villagers and her grandma. But she didn't expect her world would turn upside down. Next day, Sam came to the university. As he was passing through the main gate, he could feel the students staring at him and whispering to each other's ears. As he entered the corridor, he clenched his jaw, seeing the posters of him and Wine tangled up in the bed. He began tearing it off with strained expressions, while all the students went silent. Is this some kind of drama or a show? Everyone get lost. He growled at the students, who quickly walked away. Sam rubbed his palm over his face when he heard the janitor's voice. Sir, Dean has called you to his office. Sam nodded and made his way to the dean's office. He knocked on the door and entered after hearing a student coming. He knew what was coming. Sir, you are looking for me. The dean took off his glasses and gestured him to sit. Mind explaining? He said, throwing the poster in front of him. Sir, I swear I didn't do anything. He hissed at the poster and tore it off. What about Wine? Was she behind all this? The dean raised a brow at him. A pair of teary eyes and innocent face flashed before Sam's eyes. No way, sir, this is all well thought out, planned by someone. Wine is a brilliant student. This will destroy her future. I have heard from my sources that her family is marrying her off to some old man. He spoke, rubbing his temples. Them's eyes wide and what? There's a way to save her, Them. Only you can do it. Them passed him a questioning gaze. You should marry her. Them's eyes widened with surprise. What? He whispered with shock. Listen, Them, you were also involved in this. Even if you are terminated, that wouldn't matter because your future is bright, but wine? Her life will be destroyed. Her family isn't supportive. But sir, he got cut off. Think about it thoroughly. We don't have much time. Your decision can either save her life or destroy her. Then let out a sigh, running his fingers through his hair. Time skip. One had locked up herself in her room, curled up in a corner. She could hear her dad and stepmom yelling. Her father didn't believe her. It hurted her, but his words, I should have agreed to mom and married her off. Mom was right about her. She couldn't shrug it off. Why did he even bring her here? Did he ever think of her as his daughter? Or did he do it just to show the world? Everything was fake. She was nowhere in his life since the day she was born. Her grandpa was the only person who loved her. Her dad just loves and trusts Bella and her mom. They were continuously tarnishing her character. She wanted to escape and hide somewhere. The door banged, making her flinch. Open the door, bitch. Her sharp tone pierced through Wayne's ear. She stared at the door with a horrified expression. Mrs. Hong began banging it hard. Wayne stood with trembling feet and walked to the door. She opened the door only to receive a death stare. Come with me. You will no longer stay here, she said and grabbed her hair harshly. Wayne hissed in pain, but Mrs. Hong ignored it and began dragging her by hair. Mom, please leave me. She barely mumbled. Mrs. Hong flung her into the living room. Here is your bride, Mr. Park. As Wayne looked up, she wanted to puke. She assumed the guy to be in his mid-60s. He had a disgusting smile on his face. Wayne vigorously shook her head in denial. Mom, please, I don't want to get married. She pleaded, but it was unheard to Mrs. Hong. Let's go, beautiful girl. The guy stood and held her arm. Leave me. He was dragging her. She yanked his hand with a jerk and released her arm. The poor old guy was too weak to hold on to his own weight. Dad, I will do whatever you say. Please don't send me with him. She rushed towards her dad, who just entered the living room, and pleaded, choking her tears. Mr. Hong looked away from her. Mrs. Hong held her elbow and dragged her away while Wayne was too weak to resist. Get lost from here, she said and flung her. Before Wayne could fall, a pair of muscular arms held her. Her vision was blurred. She couldn't see his face clearly. Wayne, she recognized his familiar voice. Professor Kim, she thought and blinked her eyes. Now she could see his strained expressions. He was glaring at the direction of her dad and stepmom. Hey, give my bride back, Mr. Park said furiously. Then helped her stand and raised his brow at Mr. Park and gazed at him head to toe. Don't you have shame? You are in the age of her grandfather. He hissed at him. Get away from here before I lose my temper, he said through clenched jaw and rubbed his temples. You'll pay for it, Mrs. Hong, if I didn't get my bride. He warned her. Please wait, Mr. Park. He's known to talk in our personal matter. You matchstick, get lost. I swear my hands are itching to break your bones. He turned towards Mrs. Hong. This is my matter because it is about my soon-to-be wife. He emphasized each word. One stared at him with disbelief. Mr. and Mrs. Hong looked at him surprisingly. I'll make you pay for it. He walked away while Mrs. Hong was trying hard to stop him. The ring entered. Why don't you give your daughter to him, Mrs. Hong? He pat Wayne's head, who was blankly staring at the invisible point, and handed him the papers. Your marriage documents, he said with a smile. Ham nodded and looked at Mr. Hong, who was staring at him with questioning gaze. Let's get to the point. With or without your consent, I am taking Wayne as lawfully my wife. Mr. Hong stepped closer to him. Did you ask my permission? Tim smirked. Your wife asked your permission, setting that cringe matchstick for Wayne. She's also stranger to Wayne, so am I. His cold tone was enough to make Mrs. Hong shiver. Mr. Hong just looked away. The dean was saying something to Wayne, but no one could guess if she was listening or not. Then signed the papers and passed them to Wayne. Soon they took her away. Time skip. Wayne didn't know how she signed the papers. How did she reach Theon's house? What Theon and Dean were talking about. She was like a statue. They reached Theon's house. Theon escorted her to the bedroom checked her. Now they were sitting in front of each other when Th spoke. Dr. Raven, will you spill it? He spoke coolly, but Raven remained silent. Th let out a sigh. Come on, Hyung, stop staring at me like you have seen an alien, he said, annoyed by Raven's continuous intense gaze. Dear brother, don't you think you are the one to spill the tea? Th leaned onto the sofa. Hyung, I'd already told you she's my wife. Now tell me what happened to her. Is she okay? Raven raised his brows. Firstly, she has passed out due to intense stress. I have injected her. She might be drowsy for a while. Secondly, I know she's your wife, but as far as I know, you were never into some girl. Seeing her condition, I am certain something has happened. Theo rubbed his eyes and told him everything. Raven nodded and smiled. No wonder wine is beautiful. Theo looked at him with surprised look. I told you a serious matter and all you said is wine is beautiful, he said with disbelief. Raven chuckled. I know my intelligent brother will sort it out. Theo frustratedly ran his fingers through his hair. Hyung, I'm just worried about Dad. How would I explain it? Raven burst into laughter. Little brother, you must coax him. He's already mad at you. Hyung gulped. Mr. Kim was the only person whom Hyung feared. Hyung, you must help me. When you go there, somehow just tell him I got married. Rest I will explain once I get there. Raven stood and pat his shoulder. I will inform him, but he wouldn't hesitate to hit you in front of your wife, Raven said with a mischievous smile. Hyung, why are you scaring me? Tell him when there will be just a few days for our arrival. I'll kick you out if you didn't arrive 20 days before my wedding. Hyung nodded and bid him farewell. Few days later. It's been few days, wine is still drowsy. Hyung eats breakfast and lunch in her room and goes to the university. He returns from the university and serves her dinner, but she's stuck to the bed and barely eats. Now Hyung brought her the dinner and let out a sigh. He thought she needed time to accept it all, but she was like a statue. He kept the tray on the bedside table and came towards her. He decided to talk to her. Wine, get up. He sat beside her and shook her shoulder. Wine. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling blankly. Hyung knew she was awake. Tears rolled down her eyes. Hyung let out a sigh. Wine said, wiping her face and stared at him. Why did you do it to me? She grabbed his collar out of the blue and barely whispered, but Hyung heard it. What did I do? I'm also a victim along with you. He held her hands. Wine released him with a jerk and began hitting him on the chest with her fist. It happened all because of you. Why were you there? You ruined my life. She began sobbing hard while continuously hitting him. After 22 years, I got my family, but just because of you, I lost it again. She was yelling and crying like a maniac. Hyung felt pity for her. How did you lose someone you never even had? She stopped hitting him and placed her head on his shoulder, still weeping. Hyung hesitantly embraced her. Hit me as much as you want, but please don't cry anymore. He let out a sigh, seeing her messed up state. Wine sniffled and looked at him, her eyes widened, realizing her position. She quickly pulled away. Sorry, she mumbled while her cheeks flushed red due to embarrassment. Go and freshen up. I have brought the dinner, he said, pointing at the tray and stood. Wine sat still with lowered head. Hyung made his way out of the bedroom but stopped. Your belongings are here, including your books. Tomorrow, be ready, you will go to the university with me, he said, and walked out without hearing her answer. Wine looked around the room and let out a sigh. Next morning, Wine was wide awake since 4 a.m. She was pacing back and forth, thinking how to talk to Hyung. She glanced at the wall clock. It was 6:30 a.m. She picked up the tray and made her way towards the door. As she held the doorknob, the door flung open, revealing a sleeping Hyung. She quickly moved aside with a lowered head. Hyung glanced at her and made his way towards the washroom. Wine walked towards the kitchen and placed the tray on the kitchen slab. She looked around the house. It was quite small, with 1 bedroom, 1 washroom, kitchen, and a living room. She let out a sigh and took out all the ingredients to prepare breakfast. After 15 minutes, she had her breakfast on the dining table in the kitchen and picked up the dishes. She turned around and saw Hyung entering the kitchen. She cleared her throat and spoke in a low tone. Sir, Hyung looked at her with a questioning gaze. I have prepared breakfast. She spoke hesitantly, lowering her gaze. Thank you. He stood still, staring at her. Speak up, I'm listening. He crossed his arms around the chest and said, knowing she wanted to say something. you really guilty? No, you know everything. Nothing had happened that night. You are the witness to my innocence. She spoke swiftly. Sam nodded and stepped closer. I know nothing has happened. But why do you want everyone to believe you are the culprit by hiding like a coward? Life doesn't stop with these incidents. We have to fight, be strong and face the world. No one is going to defend you here. She stared at him while tears streamed down her face. Trust me, you will always find me by your side. Now stop crying. He patted her head. She nodded and wiped her face. Thank you, sir. She whispered, but loud enough for Sam to hear. He nodded and turned around, sliding his hands into the collars. Sir, she called him. Sam stopped and passed her a questioning gaze. I'm sorry for last night, she mumbled in an embarrassed tone. Sam shook his head and walked out while Wine placed the dishes in the sink. And skip. Wine reached the university with Sam. She asked him to drop her a little further from the university as she didn't want to come into anyone's sight. Sam was annoyed by it, but he remained silent. She was walking by the hallway when everyone began murmuring into each other's ears. She lowered her head and nervously made her way towards the classroom. As Wine entered the classroom, everyone went silent. She gulped and hesitantly walked to her seat. After a few minutes, everyone were immersed in their business. She let out a sigh of relief and looked around for her best friend, Amy, but she was nowhere. Wine shook her head and stared blankly at the book in her hand. Soon the classes began and she saw Amy with the group of girls who used to be Wine's bully. Wine tried to talk to her, but she acted as if Wine didn't even exist. Wine made a mental note to talk to her later and focused on the lecture. She noticed some teachers stared at her weirdly, while some didn't even spare a glance at her. Wine felt like a culprit. Wine's gaze diverted to the giggles of Amy and the group of girls. Amy seemed to be very happy between them. Wine flinched when the teacher slammed the desk and called her name. Wine quickly stood while the class went silent. Yes, ma'am. Out of my class. Wine frowned. But why, ma'am? You are talking a lot, that's enough, she said sternly. But ma'am, I haven't. The teacher cut her off. I said out. She yelled at her, strays erupted into muffled laughs. Wine glanced at Amy. She was suppressing her smile as if trying not to burst out laughing. Wine walked out of the class holding back her tears. Soon the class dismissed. It was break time. Wine made her way towards the cafe. She saw her class fellow standing in a corner. I asked the teacher why she yelled at Wine. We all know she was quiet all the time. The teacher said she felt disgusting and suffocated in Wine's presence. Of course, who would tolerate her presence? After all, she has a scandal with her professor. These were the girls who had a crush on Sam and talked dirty. I didn't know behind Wine's innocent face a slut is hiding. She seduced Professor Kim, had a scandal with him and even married him. Such a smart girl. They went silent seeing Wine, but she heard it all. They were the same girls who were so sweet around her when they needed notes or had some confusion. Wine shook her head and went to the cafe. She entered the cafe. The air was filled with laughers. Students were huddled around chairs, munching on snacks and chatting animatedly. Wine looked around in search of Amy. She was seated between those girls, laughing and chatting. Wine stared at her blankly. A few days ago, she was also laughing and gossiping with Amy, but then everything turned upside down. Wine sucked in the air and let out a deep breath. She made her way towards Amy. Amy stopped laughing, seeing Wine approach her. Amy, I want to talk to you. Amy looked away and ignored him. Amy, she almost slammed the table, taking everyone by surprise. Amy, just get rid of her. 𝐏𝐫𝐿, the leader of the group, said, rolling her eyes. Amy opened her mouth to say something but stopped and nodded. Speak, I'm hearing. She stood and said, pushing her arms around her chest. Wine glanced at the girls who were curiously staring at them. I want to talk alone. She held Amy's hand and began dragging her, but Amy yanked it. Stop, Wine. Talk here if you want to, she said in a harsh tone. Amy interrupted her while all the students gathered around them. Bella also entered along with Molly. Actually, I know what you want to say. Wine looked at the students who were whispering into each other's ears. I don't want to be friends with you anymore. My mom doesn't want you to be around me. You have a scandal with Professor Kim. I don't want to ruin my character by being with you. Wine stared at her with disbelief. I thought you would at least listen to me, but look at your narrow mindset. Thank God I got to see your true color. There's no use to speak to you, she said and turned around, trying hard not to burst into tears. dear professor. She tilted her head towards Swan. Wine opened her mouth to speak, but Bella cut her off dramatically. Oh, I see, how can I forget? Her mother was also a prostitute, like mother, like daughter. The cafe erupted with whispers. Swan stared at her with wide eyes. Sam was passing by the cafe. He stopped seeing the students surrounded by wine. He was about to enter when Wine's next move stopped him. Wine's hand raised in air and left a red mark on Bella's cheek. Everyone gasped. Bella held her cheek and looked at her with disbelief. How dare? Wine placed another slap on her cheek, taking her off guard. No way, Bella, just because I stayed quiet doesn't mean you will spew shit and expect me to take it. Talking trash about others doesn't make you look good. Look at yourselves. She turned towards all the students. Tell me, are you all innocent yet pure? I know everyone's dead. If I begin talking about you, I swear you will not find a place to hide your face. Cam smiled and walked away. Wine passed Bella a dead stare and was about to walk out, but stopped and turned towards Amy, who stood with lowered head. You really let me down, Amy. I expected better from you. It's a bummer to realize your true colors, but at least now I know who you really are. She said with a bitter smile and walked out. Wine came and sat on the bench in the court. She looked up to the sky and let her tears flow freely. She was numb, her mind was blank. After crying her heart out for a good 5 minutes, she wiped her face and glanced at her wristwatch. The class had started, but she didn't want to go. She leaned on the bench when she felt a hand on her shoulder. Wine looked back and mumbled, Arthur. He passed her a smile and sat beside her. It's me, how are you? He said, staring at her. Wine looked away. I'm fine, she mumbled and stared at her palms blankly. Wouldn't you? Arthur interrupted her. I know what you want to say. He said and let out a sigh, staring at the invisible point. I trust you, Wine. I'm certain whatever happened has been planned by someone. How can you trust me when my loved ones didn't? A sad smile formed on Arthur's face. He looked at Wine. Because I can see your innocence. You don't have to prove it. He stared at her with a soft gaze. Wine glanced at him and looked away. Wine, I have been fond of you ever since I saw you for the first time. Every time I look at you, I see my sister in you. He said in a low tone. Where is your sister? Arthur looked up to the sky. She's up there. Wine passed him a questioning gaze. She committed suicide a few years ago. A lone tear rolled down his cheek. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked it. Arthur wiped his face and shook his head. It's okay. He held her hand with a smile. I got my sister back and I'm really grateful for it. Wine smiled back at him and nodded, not knowing a pair of ops were shooting daggers at them. By the way, are you not going to take class? No. Why? He asked with raised brows. It's Professor King's class, she said in a low tone. So what? The handsome professor is your husband. One passed him a glare, he chuckled and both of them went silent. After some time, Arthur spoke. Wine, don't let anyone's words affect you. They will never stop speaking shit about us even if we die. The most important thing is you have him by your side. He said in a state of trance. Wine nodded lost in deep thought. Arthur glanced at his wristwatch. I must attend the lecture. He stood. Thank you so much, Arthur, for making me feel like I have a brother. Arthur passed her a smile. Take care, he said, patting her head and walked away. Wine stared at his retreating figure and pondered his words. After some time, she stood and made her way towards the classroom. She was passing by the hallway when her eyes landed on the posters of her and Theon hung on each wall. Plus from which was boldly written over her picture. She stared at them for a while and then tore them off. She turned around to leave when her gaze landed on Theon, who was coming in her direction. Why did you bunk the class? He asked and glanced at her hand. What is this? Wine hurried behind her. I bunked the class because I needed a break. Theon's gaze was fixed on the posters behind her. Show me this, he said and quickly took it from her hands. Wine noticed his expression strained while the veins in his forehead popped out of anger. Sir, he passed her a glare. This is too much, he muttered, holding her hand and began dragging her. Where are we going? She asked confusingly. To the dean. You will complain about those students in the cafe and these posters. He said sternly. Wine